Steve Harvey had hosted Family Feud for over 15 years, witnessing countless moments of joy, laughter, tears, and unexpected revelations from the families who appeared on his stage. He had navigated awkward answers, emotional victories, and the occasional family tension that arose during competitive gameplay. However, nothing in his extensive television career could have prepared him for what would unfold on that September afternoon in 2024, when a woman's decision to reveal the results of a DNA test during the taping would stop the game completely, freeze Steve Harvey mid-sentence, and create a moment of raw human drama that would challenge everything he thought he knew about handling crisis situations on live television. The Morrison family from Detroit, Michigan stood ready to compete against the Garcia family from Houston, Texas, both families appearing excited and enthusiastic about their opportunity to participate in America's favorite game show. But beneath the surface of rehearsed smiles and coordinated outfits, a devastating secret was about to explode with consequences that would ripple far beyond the confines of the studio. If you value authentic stories about families facing their most difficult truths, please take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for powerful content about real people navigating life's unexpected challenges. Michael and Angela Morrison had been married for 12 years, though the foundation of their relationship had been built on assumptions that Angela had recently discovered were fundamentally false. Michael was 38 years old, a dedicated automotive engineer whose career at one of Detroit's major manufacturers had provided stability and security for his family. He carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who believed he had built a good life through hard work and commitment to his family values. Angela, 36, worked as a dental hygienist and had always prided herself on being a devoted mother to their 2 children and a supportive partner to her husband. She stood beside Michael on the Family Feud stage in a carefully chosen outfit, her outward appearance of composure masking the turmoil that had been consuming her for the past 3 weeks. Their children completed the family lineup. 10-year-old Jordan stood between his parents, excited to be on television and completely unaware of the storm that was about to break over his young life. 7-year-old Casey bounced with barely contained energy, thrilled to be on her favorite game show and eager to show the world how smart and funny her family could be. Michael's mother, 62-year-old Dorothy Morrison, rounded out the family team, proud to be representing 3 generations on national television and confident that her close-knit family would perform well in the competition. What the studio audience and viewers at home could not know was the devastating discovery that Angela had made 3 weeks earlier, a discovery that had shattered her understanding of her marriage, her family, and the man she thought she knew better than anyone in the world. It had started with an innocent birthday gift. Jordan had received a consumer DNA testing kit as part of a science project at school, and the entire family had decided to participate together, sending in their samples to learn about their genetic ancestry and heritage. The results were expected to be fun and educational, perhaps revealing unexpected ethnic backgrounds or distant relatives, the kind of harmless information that families discussed over dinner and shared with extended relatives. When the results arrived, Angela had opened them casually while Michael was at work and the children were at school. She had scanned through her own results first, finding the expected mix of European and African ancestry that aligned with what she knew of her family history. She had then opened Jordan's results, curious to see how his genetic background compared to hers. What she saw made her blood run cold and her hands begin to tremble uncontrollably. According to the DNA analysis, Angela was not Jordan's biological mother. The test results showed no genetic relationship between her and the child she had given birth to 10 years earlier, the child she had nursed and raised and loved with every fiber of her being. The initial shock gave way to confusion and then to a desperate search for explanation. She checked the paperwork repeatedly, convinced there must have been a mistake with the samples or a mix-up at the laboratory. She researched online about accuracy rates and the possibility of errors in DNA testing. She reviewed every detail of Jordan's birth, remembering clearly the pregnancy, the delivery, the moment they had placed her newborn son in her arms. There was no possibility of adoption or surrogacy or any other explanation that would make sense of these results. She had given birth to Jordan. She was his mother. The DNA test had to be wrong. But as Angela continued to investigate, reading about hospital protocols and rare cases of babies being switched at birth, a terrible possibility began to take shape in her mind. She researched the hospital where Jordan had been born, discovering that it had been involved in a lawsuit years earlier related to identification procedures in the maternity ward. She found news articles about other families who had discovered through DNA testing that their children had been switched at birth due to hospital errors. The evidence mounted until she could no longer deny what seemed impossible, but was apparently true. Jordan was not her biological child. Somewhere, somehow, in the chaos of the hospital's maternity ward 10 years ago, her baby had been given to another family, and another family's baby had been given to her. The realization sent Angela into a tailspin of grief, confusion, and desperate need for answers. She ordered additional DNA tests from different companies, hoping desperately that the first results had been an error. All of them came back with the same devastating conclusion. She tested herself against Casey, finding the expected mother-daughter genetic connection that confirmed the tests were working correctly. She tested Jordan against Michael, and that result provided the second shocking revelation that would lead to the confrontation on the Family Feud stage. Jordan was not Michael's biological child either. The baby that had been brought to them at the hospital 12 years ago shared no genetic connection with either of the people who had raised him as their son. Angela's initial instinct had been to tell Michael immediately, to share this devastating discovery with her husband so they could face it together as a team. But something held her back. Over the 12 years of their marriage, Michael had become increasingly fixated on traditional family values, on bloodlines and genetic legacy. He frequently spoke about his pride in having a son to carry on the Morrison name, about the importance of biological connections and family heritage. He had strong opinions about adoption and had been dismissive when friends or family members had chosen that path to parenthood, suggesting that raising someone else's child could never be the same as raising your own biological offspring. Angela began to fear how Michael would react to the news that Jordan was not biologically theirs. Would he still love Jordan with the same devotion? Would he want to search for their biological child and potentially upend Jordan's entire life? Would he blame Angela somehow for what happened at the hospital? The questions tormented her for days as she struggled with whether and how to reveal what she had discovered. The Family Feud appearance had been scheduled months earlier, planned during happier times when the Morrison family had believed they knew who they were and how they fit together. As the taping date approached, Angela found herself trapped between the need to tell Michael the truth and the fear of what that truth would do to their family. She made a decision that she would later recognize as driven by desperation and poor judgment. She would tell Michael on the Family Feud stage, in a public setting where his initial reaction would be constrained by the presence of cameras and audience, where he would have to process this information with some measure of public accountability, rather than in the privacy of their home where his response might be less controlled. Angela understood that this decision was unfair to Michael, to their children, to Steve Harvey, and to everyone else who would witness the revelation. But she felt trapped by circumstances she had not created and terrified of Michael's potential reaction in private. She convinced herself that the public setting might actually protect everyone involved, that Michael's need to maintain composure in front of cameras would prevent an explosive response that could traumatize the children. It was flawed reasoning born of fear and desperation, but it was the logic that led her to bring the DNA test results with her to the studio that day. The game began with typical Family Feud energy and excitement. Steve Harvey engaged both families with his characteristic humor and warmth, creating an atmosphere of fun competition. The Morrison family performed well in the opening rounds, with Michael providing solid answers and Jordan delighting the audience with his enthusiastic participation. Dorothy Morrison charmed Steve with her quick wit and competitive spirit. Angela played adequately but seemed distracted, her mind clearly elsewhere even as she mechanically participated in the game. It was during the third round that Angela made her move. The Morrison family had just won the round, and the audience was applauding their performance when Angela stepped forward from her position at the family podium. She raised her hand to get Steve Harvey's attention, her action so unexpected and so contrary to the usual flow of the game that it immediately caught his notice and silenced the celebrating family members. Steve turned to Angela with a slightly confused smile, assuming she perhaps wanted to say something celebratory or thank someone in the audience. He approached her with his microphone extended, ready to give her a moment to speak whatever was on her mind. The studio audience waited with the pleasant curiosity that came from an unexpected deviation from the standard game show format. Angela's voice shook as she began to speak, and immediately Steve's expression shifted from casual interest to concern as he recognized that whatever was about to happen was not going to be the lighthearted moment he had anticipated. Angela looked directly at Michael as she spoke, her words coming out in a rush as if she feared losing courage if she paused. "Michael, I need to tell you something right now, and I need everyone here to witness it. 3 weeks ago, I got the results from those DNA tests we all took with Jordan for his school project. The results showed something that I have verified multiple times with different testing companies. Jordan is not our biological son. He was switched at birth at the hospital 12 years ago. The baby we brought home was not the baby I gave birth to. Somewhere out there is our biological child being raised by another family, and the child we have loved and raised for 10 years is not genetically ours." The words hung in the air as minds throughout the studio struggled to process what had just been said. Steve Harvey literally froze mid-step, his mouth slightly open, his expression transforming from confusion to shock to dawning horror as he understood the magnitude of what was being revealed and the setting in which it was happening. The studio audience gasped collectively, the sound rolling through the space like a wave. The Garcia family stood at their podium in complete disbelief, suddenly unwilling witnesses to a family crisis that went far beyond anything appropriate for a game show setting. Michael's face went through a rapid succession of emotions. Confusion came first as his brain worked to comprehend the words his wife had just spoken. Confusion gave way to disbelief, to a desperate hope that he had misheard or misunderstood what Angela was saying. Disbelief transformed into shock as the meaning became clear and undeniable. He turned to look at Jordan, his son, the boy he had raised from infancy, and his expression reflected the psychological earthquake of having his fundamental understanding of his family shattered in an instant. Jordan stood frozen, his 10-year-old mind unable to fully process what his mother had just revealed, but understanding enough to know that something terrible was happening. Tears began streaming down his face as he looked between his parents, searching for reassurance that he was still loved, still wanted, still part of the family despite whatever his mother was saying about DNA and hospitals and other children. Casey had started crying as well, frightened by the sudden shift in atmosphere and her brother's tears even if she did not understand the words that had triggered this crisis. Dorothy Morrison's face reflected both shock at the revelation and anger at her daughter-in-law for choosing to reveal such devastating information in such a public setting. She moved instinctively toward Jordan, putting a protective arm around her grandson even as her mind reeled with the implications of what Angela had just disclosed. Steve Harvey found his voice after several seconds of frozen silence, and when he spoke, his tone carried none of its usual jovial warmth. Instead, it reflected the profound shock and dismay of someone who had just witnessed something deeply wrong unfold on his stage. His words came out slowly, carefully, as he tried to process what had just happened and determine how to respond to a situation for which no game show host training could have prepared him. "Angela, I need to make sure I understand what you just said. You are telling your husband for the first time, right here on this stage, that your son was switched at birth and is not biologically yours or his. You chose to reveal this information here now, in front of cameras and audience and your children." Angela nodded, tears streaming down her face as the reality of what she had done crashed over her. Her voice broke as she tried to explain her reasoning, though even to her own ears the explanation sounded hollow and inadequate. "I was afraid to tell him at home. Michael has always been so focused on bloodlines and biological family. I was terrified of how he would react, what he might say or do to Jordan if I told him in private. I thought if I told him here with everyone watching, he would have to control his reaction, and we could get through the initial shock together before dealing with it at home." Steve Harvey's expression reflected a mixture of sympathy for Angela's fear and dismay at her decision-making. He turned to address the production crew with clear authority in his voice, making a decision in the moment about how this situation needed to be handled. "We are stopping this taping immediately. Cameras off. Clear the studio. This family needs privacy right now, not an audience." The production team moved quickly to comply. The cameras stopped recording. The studio lights dimmed. Steve addressed the audience directly, his voice firm and serious as he explained that they were witnessing a genuine family crisis that required privacy and dignity rather than entertainment. He asked everyone to leave quietly and respectfully, and to please not share details of what they had witnessed out of consideration for the family involved, and especially for the children who were at the center of this revelation. As the studio cleared, Steve turned his full attention to the Morrison family. Michael had not moved or spoken since Angela's revelation, his face a mask of shock and confusion as he tried to process information that contradicted everything he thought he knew about his family. Jordan was crying openly, his small body shaking with sobs as he clung to his grandmother. Casey had buried her face in Dorothy's side, overwhelmed by emotions she could not name or understand. Angela stood apart, isolated by her choice to reveal this information in such a public way, crying but also watching Michael's reaction with visible fear about what would come next. Steve Harvey spoke gently but firmly, his voice cutting through the chaos of emotion to provide some structure and direction to a situation that threatened to spiral completely out of control. He addressed the family with the compassion of someone who understood pain and the authority of someone who recognized that immediate intervention was necessary. Everyone, I need you to listen to me carefully. What just happened here is one of the most serious and difficult situations a family can face. But we are going to handle this the right way, which means protecting these children first and foremost. Michael, Angela, I understand you are both in shock right now. I understand this is devastating and confusing and overwhelming. But before we do anything else, we need to make sure Jordan and Casey understand that they are loved and safe. He knelt down to be at eye level with Jordan, his voice gentle and reassuring as he spoke directly to the frightened child. Jordan, I need you to hear something very important. What your mom just said about DNA and hospitals, that is very complicated grown-up information that she should have shared with your dad in private. But none of it, changes the fact that you are loved. Your mom and dad have raised you since you were born. They have loved you every single day of your life. You are their son in every way that matters. Steve turned to Michael, and his voice took on a note of firm insistence as he addressed the man who was still standing in shocked silence. Michael, I know you are processing something huge right now. I know this is devastating news delivered in the worst possible way. But your son is standing right here, terrified that you do not love him anymore because of what he just heard his mother say. And before we deal with anything else, before we process the DNA results or talk about what happened at the hospital or figure out next steps, you need to tell your son that you love him. Michael seemed to snap out of his frozen state at Steve's words. He looked at Jordan, really looked at him, seeing the fear and anguish on his child's face. Whatever complicated emotions Michael was experiencing about the DNA revelation, whatever questions and concerns were flooding his mind, they were overridden in that moment by the immediate need to comfort his terrified son. He moved to Jordan and pulled him into a tight embrace, his own tears falling as he held the boy he had raised for 10 years. I love you, Jordan. I love you so much. You are my son. Nothing changes that. Nothing. Michael's voice broke on the words, but he repeated them with increasing strength and conviction. You are my son. You will always be my son. I love you. The sight of Michael embracing Jordan while both cried seemed to break something in Angela. She collapsed into sobs, her body shaking with the force of her grief and relief and guilt over what she had done. Dorothy maintained her composure for the sake of the children, but her face reflected the tumult of emotions she was experiencing about this revelation and how it had been handled. Steve Harvey allowed the family several minutes to simply hold each other and cry before he spoke again. When he did, his voice carried both compassion and a clear determination to ensure this situation was handled properly moving forward. He addressed Angela first, his tone gentle but containing an unmistakable note of reproach for her decision to reveal such devastating information in such a public manner. Angela, I understand you were afraid. I understand you were struggling with how to tell Michael about what you discovered. But what you did today, revealing this information on this stage in front of cameras and audience and your children, that was not the right choice. It was not fair to Michael, who deserved to learn this in private where he could process it without being watched. It was not fair to Jordan, who should never have found out he was switched at birth by overhearing his mother announce it on television. It was not fair to anyone involved in this situation. Angela nodded through her tears, accepting the truth of Steve's words even as she struggled to explain her reasoning. I know it was wrong. I just did not know what else to do. I was so scared of how Michael would react. I was terrified he would stop loving Jordan or would want to send him back to his biological family or something terrible. I thought if I told him here with everyone watching, he would have to stay calm and we could get through it without him doing something in anger that he could not take back. Steve turned to Michael, his expression serious as he addressed the man who was still holding his son. Michael, Angela said she was afraid to tell you this in private because of things you have said about biological family and bloodlines. She was afraid you might reject Jordan because he is not genetically yours. I need to know, is there any truth to that fear? Because if there is, we need to address it right now before this goes any further. Michael pulled back slightly from Jordan but kept his hands on his son's shoulders as he answered, his voice thick with emotion but clear in its conviction. No. No, there is no truth to that. Jordan is my son. I do not care what any DNA test says. I have been his father since the day he was born. I have held him when he was sick and taught him to ride a bike and helped him with his homework and gone to every soccer game and school play. Biology does not change any of that. He is my son and I am his father, and that is the end of it. He turned to Angela, and his voice took on a note of hurt and confusion as he addressed his wife. Angela, if you thought I was the kind of man who would abandon our child because of DNA results, then you do not know me at all. Yes, I have said things about biological family and heritage, but those were abstract conversations, not statements about what I would do if confronted with a situation like this. How could you think I would stop loving Jordan? How could you think so little of me that you believed I needed to be controlled by public pressure to keep me from hurting our son? The question hung in the air, exposing a deeper problem in the Morrison marriage beyond the DNA revelation. Angela had feared her husband's reaction so profoundly that she had chosen to reveal devastating information in a public setting, rather than trust him to respond with love and compassion in private. That fear spoke to issues in their relationship that would need to be addressed alongside the practical and emotional challenges created by the discovery of Jordan's true biological origins. Steve Harvey recognized that the immediate crisis had been stabilized, but that the family faced an incredibly complex road ahead. He made a series of decisions in rapid succession, using his platform and resources to ensure the Morrison family received the help they desperately needed to navigate this unprecedented situation. Here is what is going to happen, Steve announced with calm authority. First, this episode is not airing. What happened here today is a private family matter that should never have been made public, and we are not going to compound that mistake by broadcasting it to millions of viewers. The footage will be deleted, and everyone who was in this studio today will be asked to respect your privacy. He continued, laying out a plan of support and resources. Second, I am connecting you with the best family therapist I know, someone who specializes in helping families navigate exactly this kind of crisis. You are all going to need professional support to process what you have learned and to figure out what comes next. Jordan and Casey especially need someone who can help them understand what this means and reassure them that they are safe and loved. Steve paused before addressing the most complex aspect of the situation. Third, I am connecting you with a lawyer who specializes in hospital negligence and switched at birth cases. What happened to your family 12 years ago was not your fault. It was the result of hospital error, and you deserve answers about how it happened and what recourse you have. You also need legal guidance about what this means for Jordan and for the child who is biologically yours but was raised by another family. The mention of their biological child seemed to hit both Michael and Angela with fresh force. In the chaos of the revelation and its immediate aftermath, they had focused entirely on Jordan and how this discovery affected him. But somewhere out there was another child, a 12-year-old who carried their genetic material and was being raised by a family who believed he or she was biologically theirs. That child and that family would also be devastated by this revelation when it eventually came to light. Dorothy Morrison spoke for the first time since the revelation, her voice shaky but determined as she addressed Steve Harvey and the immediate situation. What about my grandson? What about the baby who should have been ours? Do we have to tell that family? Do we have to try to find that child? Steve's expression reflected the gravity and complexity of that question. Those are decisions that need to be made carefully with professional legal and therapeutic guidance. There is no simple right answer. Your biological child has the right to know the truth about their origins eventually. The family raising that child deserves to know what happened at the hospital. But how and when that information is shared needs to be handled with incredible care to minimize trauma for everyone involved, especially the children. He looked at Jordan directly, ensuring the child understood what was being discussed. Jordan, you are going to hear a lot of complicated information in the coming days and weeks, but I want you to remember what your dad just told you. You are his son. DNA does not change 12 years of love and family. Your mom and dad are your parents in every way that truly matters. Nothing that happened at the hospital 12 years ago changes that fundamental truth. The Morrison family spent the next several hours in private consultation with Steve Harvey and the resources he provided. They spoke with Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a renowned family therapist who had worked with other switched-at-birth families and understood the unique trauma and complexity of their situation. Dr. Mitchell helped them begin to process the immediate crisis while also preparing them for the long journey ahead of integrating this new information into their family narrative. and making decisions about how to handle the biological child issue. They also consulted with Thomas Warren, an attorney who had handled several high-profile cases of babies switched at birth due to hospital negligence. He explained the legal landscape they were facing, including potential lawsuits against the hospital, the complex question of custody and rights regarding the biological child, and the careful legal procedures that would be necessary if they chose to pursue contact with the other family involved in the switch. Over the following weeks and months, the Morrison family embarked on one of the most difficult journeys any family could face. They engaged in intensive family therapy to process the trauma of the revelation and its impact on everyone involved. Jordan received individual counseling to help him understand what being switched at birth meant, and to reassure him that his parents' love was not contingent on genetic connection. Casey also worked with a therapist to address her confusion and fear about what had happened to her family. Michael and Angela entered couples counseling to address the deeper issues in their marriage that had led Angela to fear her husband's reactions so profoundly that she felt the need to reveal the information in a public setting. They worked on communication, trust, and examining the attitudes about biological family that had contributed to Angela's fear about how Michael would respond to learning Jordan was not genetically theirs. The legal investigation into what happened at the hospital confirmed Angela's research. 12 years earlier, the hospital's maternity ward had been understaffed during a particularly busy period. Proper identification procedures had been inadequate, and 2 baby boys born on the same day had been switched and given to the wrong families. The hospital had since implemented much more rigorous identification protocols, but that did not undo the damage done to the families affected by the earlier negligence. The Morrisons faced agonizing decisions about whether to contact the other family involved in the switch. On one hand, that family deserved to know the truth about their child's biological origins, just as the Morrisons had learned about Jordan. On the other hand, revealing this information would devastate another family and potentially traumatize another child who would learn that the parents raising them were not biologically related. There were no good options, only difficult choices with significant consequences regardless of which path they selected. 6 months after that fateful day on the Family Feud stage, the Morrison family had made significant progress in healing from the trauma of the revelation and its public nature. Michael had proven through consistent action and words that his love for Jordan was unchanged by the DNA results. He continued to be an engaged, devoted father who made clear every single day that biology was irrelevant to his commitment and love. Jordan, with the help of therapy and his parents' unwavering support, had processed the knowledge of being switched at birth, and had come to understand that family was defined by love and years of shared life rather than genetic connection. Angela lived with ongoing guilt about how she had revealed the information, recognizing through therapy that her choice to do so publicly had been driven by fear and poor judgment rather than any valid strategy for protecting her family. She worked on rebuilding trust with Michael and on examining her own assumptions about him that had led her to believe he would reject their son based on DNA results. The family ultimately decided, with legal and therapeutic guidance, to contact the other family involved in the switch. That conversation was handled through attorneys and therapists who helped both families process the devastating information and make decisions about what level of contact, if any, made sense for the children involved. The details of those discussions and their outcomes remained private, protected by the family's desire to shield the children from public scrutiny as they navigated an already traumatic situation. Steve Harvey maintained contact with the Morrison family throughout their journey, checking in periodically to see how they were progressing and offering continued support and encouragement. He spoke publicly about the incident only in general terms, emphasizing the importance of handling family crises with privacy and dignity rather than making them public spectacle. He also used the experience to highlight the reality of switched-at-birth cases and the need for rigorous hospital protocols to prevent such devastating errors. In an interview about the most difficult moments in his years of hosting Family Feud, Steve reflected on that day with the Morrison family. When Angela revealed those DNA results on stage, I froze because I could not believe what I was witnessing. I could not believe someone would choose to reveal such devastating information in such a public way. But once I processed what was happening, my only thought was protecting those children and getting that family the help they needed. Sometimes television has to stop being entertainment and start being human response to human crisis. That was one of those moments. 1 year after the revelation, the Morrison family had integrated the knowledge of Jordan's biological origins into their family story in a healthy way. Jordan understood that he had been switched at birth, but that this fact did not diminish his parents' love or his place in the family. Michael and Angela had worked through the trust issues that the public revelation had exposed, emerging with a stronger understanding of each other and a renewed commitment to open communication. The family had established boundaries with the other family involved in the switch that protected all the children while allowing for limited contact that might grow over time as the children matured. The experience had transformed the Morrison family in unexpected ways. They became advocates for improved hospital identification procedures, working with patient safety organizations to ensure other families did not experience the trauma of switched-at-birth situations. They shared their story in controlled, private settings with other families facing similar situations, offering support and understanding born of personal experience. They learned that family was not defined by genetics, but by love, commitment, and the daily choice to show up for each other through the best and worst of circumstances. For Jordan specifically, the revelation and its aftermath became a defining part of his story, but not the entirety of his identity. With the support of therapy and his family's love, he developed a healthy understanding of his unique situation. He knew he had been switched at birth. He knew there was a biological family somewhere in the world connected to him by DNA, and he knew the family raising him loved him unconditionally regardless of genetic connection. That knowledge was complex but manageable with proper support and guidance. If this story has reinforced your understanding that family is defined by love and commitment rather than biology alone, that even the most difficult truths must be handled with care and dignity, and that protecting children must always be the priority when families face crisis, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. We share these powerful stories because authentic conversations about complex family situations matter. Your engagement helps us continue creating content that addresses life's most challenging moments with honesty and compassion. Thank you for being part of this community and for recognizing that the bonds of family are built through years of love and care, not determined solely by genetic connection.